We get to set 3 more minutes. I'll wait. I'm going to talk into the mic since it's being recorded, it'll be posted. I want to make sure people from the public who watch it later on can kind of catch up to speed. So I will go through kind of an overview when we kind of start off, and then was hoping we just go around the room, introduce all of ourselves so we all know who we're working with over the next few months. And I'll talk about our goals. We'll then have our professionals talk about kind of like set the landscape as to what is going on in the cannabis industry in New Jersey, what's been happening, what Morris Township did when we opted out a few years ago, and kind of just, what the playing field is right now. So we have, and you'll meet them when they introduce themselves, but we have our planner, our planning board attorney, and our municipal attorney here, obviously Tim Quinn, our administrator as well. So they all have very good knowledge since we all went through this a few years ago. And then pretty much that's it. We need to figure out some other meeting dates too. It's really hard to get on people's schedules, but we're going to have to try to find at least 2 more dates in the fall, September and October. I don't know if we're going to have members of the public join us, but we will have a public Q&A, or not Q&A, just a public comment period, probably at our 4th meeting. I put on the schedule a 5th meeting. I don't know if we're going to need it, but I just put it there just in case we do.
Are we going to turn out some, I'm going to call it frequently asked questions that we could maybe post somewhere for people? Because there will be some consistency, I think, in what people want to know.
Yeah, for sure.
This stuff, and if we have some answers that we could
You're talking about as part of the report at the end of
well,
each meeting.
or I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to make it work for anybody, but people are hearing about this, and it was posted in the municipal messenger. The wheels will start turning, and they'll be wanting to ask questions, and they'll ask you each individually questions, or we can answer through a FQA.
That's a good idea.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, we started doing that with the redevelopment hearings when we were having them, and I think it's better to just get the questions answered ahead of time. So that's definitely something we can think about doing before the public comment. But yeah, so that's basically it. I just want to make it sure it's it's a casual environment. We can go back and forth and ask questions. It's really just trying to do our due diligence and coming up with the best recommendation we can to the township. So I think Greg has got the meeting up and running. So Greg, if you want to start recording, we'll just get started, and then we should see if members of the public join virtually. Obviously, we don't have anyone here in person, so we'll go ahead and get started. So, first of all, thank you all for taking the time to do this for us. We really appreciate it. And one thing especially in August, one thing we wanted to try to do from a township committee perspective was make sure we're incorporating voices from all parts of the township. And it's, we're a big donut. And I think basically all the members we pretty much have someone from every different part of the circle around Morristown, which is really good. It's really important to have those neighborhood perspectives when we're talking about these things, especially since our map is just so challenging in terms of having commercial businesses here in Morris Township, because every zone pretty much has a neighborhood right on top of it or next to it. So, but just to kind of level set, actually, while I just do the intros, we'll go around the room and then I'll go into it. So obviously everyone knows, like Mark Jorf, I'm the mayor this year, but I was on the legislative standing committee back in 2021 when we decided to opt out of cannabis. For all the different types, what are they? It's not type. It's
6 classes of licenses.
Classes of licenses. So back then, the governing body wanted to make sure we opted out of everything because we just weren't sure what to expect, and we thought it was best to just let other towns kind of go through it and see how they do before we decide we wanted to delve into it. And the other aspect that was important to me was that the zoning aspect. Can we actually control where it's going to go? Or do we have to do a whole new zoning? Because my biggest fear was having it right in the neighborhood. We have, when we were looking at the map back then, I remember with Paul and Steve was, you have some businesses like Stephanie's Deli right on Western Avenue, that's in the neighborhood, or you have Fairchild Market, that's in the neighborhood. You have the business on Hanover Avenue and the Marketplace, which are right next to neighborhoods. So it's just a really challenging map to have this. So that's why we opted out first. So Bud and I are on the legislation standing committee this year, which is why we're both handling these meetings. And so that's pretty much it from an official perspective. I grew up in the township. I've been a lifelong resident here, so I want to make sure those who have been here a long time, but who also are new or are raising families here are getting everything out of it that I have, and want to make sure we're making the right decisions. So Bud, I'll turn it over to you.
Real quick, I'm Bud Ravitz, Deputy Mayor. As Mark said, he and I are on the Legislative Standing Committee. This is, an important set of meetings that we're going to have because this is a big decision for the town. And I think we got together a good group of people that'll give us perspectives from all the different areas. And unlike Mark, I did not grow up in the town. I'm only here about 7 years. So I can give you the newbie perspective, even though I don't have a family that I raised here.
So I'm Paul Phillips. I'm the township planner, also advise both the planning and zoning board. And I think I've been in those roles for the past 12 years now.
Bill Barrett, a 20-year resident, I guess literally 20 years, I think this week of 2003 is when we moved in. I raised my family here. I have 2 kids. They're both adults now. My youngest is a son. He's a rising senior at Elon University, both products of the Morris School District. I'm a member of the alternate member of the planning board here in town, and I've served on other boards within the community over the years.
Hi, I'm Betty Simmons. I am a lifelong member of the Morris Township community. My family has lived here for generations. I serve right now as an alternate member of the Board of Adjustment and also involved in the Transportation Advisory Committee.
I'm Lou Brucker. I've been a resident of the town for about 10 years. I have 9-year-old daughters, twins. They're in the public school system. I'm a business owner for the past 16 years. My business isn't in Morristown, but I have a business owner's perspective. And yeah, so that's pretty much my summary. This is my first time involved in a committee like this.
Great.
Welcome.
Thanks.
My name is Linda Murphy. I have been a longtime resident of the township. I came here first in 1984. My daughter graduated from Morristown High, and my 2 grandkids are in the middle school now. I happen to be an elected member of the Board of Education for the Morris School District. In addition to that, I've been a longtime member on the planning board, working with Bill and some of the other people here in the room. I only went away from Morris Township for a brief period of time. I went to Ohio and Georgia, but very quickly decided I should come back to Morris Township. So I've been here going on 35 years now. So it's a great place to live, and I'm happy to be invited to participate here.
Thank you, Linda.
I'm Tim Quinn, Township Administrator. Been the administrator for the past 13 years. Before that, I was in the police department for 32 years. Grew up in Morris Township. A lot of roots to the township.
Steve Warner, municipal land use lawyer throughout central and northern New Jersey, several municipalities and land use boards, none anywhere near as important as this municipality and this planning board here that I've been privileged to serve for now almost 10 years. And I also serve as the Affordable Housing Council for the township, and I am also privileged to be a resident of this township as well for several years now. Look forward to working together with everyone. I have the perspective from the municipality, but I also did have some involvement in an application related to a cannabis facility, so I know a little bit about the process from both sides, so to speak.
Good evening, everyone. Jared Cantor. I'm the founding managing partner of the law firm of Antonelli Cantor Rivera. I serve as the township attorney here. I also serve as a township attorney in Livingston. I'm the borough attorney in North Caldwell. I previously served as a borough attorney in Roselle Park and the town attorney in the town of Dover. Our firm specializes in municipal representations. We represent over 30 municipalities across the state dealing in various issues. And I've dealt with cannabis and the implementation, a lot of the public concerns, especially in similar towns to, I think, Morris Township. So I'm aware of a lot of the concerns the public has. I've also seen the implementation of it in some towns we represent, specifically Union Township has retail cannabis, 2 locations currently, and they're considering a 3rd. So I went through the zone. My partner is the township attorney there, but we had some experience in putting zoning in place in that township. So I'm happy to be here. And I actually think that, this governing body and Tim, I think this is a great idea to set up this type of committee It's a big enough group where you can get, a wide range of opinions, but it's also small enough where you feel comfortable expressing yourself. So I really actually commend this governing body and Tim and the administration for putting this together. I think it was a really good idea.
Thanks, Jared. And then Kit, you're from our clerk's office, and you're being the secretary for us
I'm
for
the
all these meetings.
secretary,
It's
yep.
prime.
So thank you for being here with us.
Well, She's got 20+ years of the township. So
Thank you. So I'm just gonna read through kind of like an overview, just not necessarily, I think everyone here kind of knows it already, but just for members of the public who do join down the road or watch the recording. So back in 2021, the Township Committee opted out of the sale, cultivation, and distribution of cannabis. And as Mr. Warner said, I believe it's six classes of licenses, which we'll learn about. Like I said, the rationale behind the Township Committee's actions in 2021 was to provide ourselves with the most flexibility as possible, with the intention to reevaluate the industry down the road. After 2 years, the Township Committee thinks it's important to analyze the implementation of cannabis opt-ins across the state to study in a thorough manner and decide whether or not the Township should revisit its decisions from 2021 to opt out of all classes. So this committee, we're hopeful, will take a disciplined approach to evaluate the status of the cannabis industry in New Jersey and strictly take a look at cannabis from an economic and zoning perspective. Because we think obviously looking at those two issues is in the town's best interests. I'd also like to point out to members of the public who will join us either through the recording or later tonight that this is an advisory committee of volunteer residents. We are here strictly for the purposes of evaluating the current state of cannabis and to report back to the Township Committee with an informed recommendation. This committee will not be taking any formal actions on behalf of the township. It serves purely in an advisory function and we'll be putting together a report to present to the Township Committee when we adjourn. We'll be meeting most likely a total of 5 times, running no longer than an hour and a half each night. Tonight's meeting, our members have already provided their backgrounds, but we'll hear an overview from the township professionals on the current landscape and get an overview as to what the opt-out ordinances actually meant from 2021. Our next meeting will focus on the potential impacts of cannabis from a planning, revenue, and enforcement perspective. The third meeting will focus on what opting in looks like throughout New Jersey, and we'll hear from subject matter experts from the cannabis industry. And the fourth meeting will have a public comment to allow open discussion, and we'll do a Q&A for members if we need to. And then if we need a fifth meeting, we'll come back and finalize what the report is, what our opinion is, whether we're all in agreement or we'll have a one opinion and a I guess what do you call it, dissenting opinion.
Or an alternate.
An alternate opinion. So
Majority.
we're not here to vote. We just want to provide all of our perspectives so the governing body can look at the report and come up with an informed decision for what they want to do down the road. So we're going to take our time. We're going to take as much time as we need, but we also want to make sure we're working with everyone's schedules too, so everyone can be present as part of this. So with that, any questions before we kind of just dive into cannabis, the cannabis industry or anything like that? Any high level questions? Great. So maybe we should talk about and I don't know who should go first, but maybe we should talk about the classes of cannabis and what us opting out meant back in 2021. I know you weren't our municipal attorney back then, but maybe that's a good part to start, and then we can.
You want to do that? You want to?
Yeah, so I'm happy. So I think one important thing for everybody to understand is there's 6 classes of cannabis licenses, and it's basically the type of licenses. And as a township, you can elect which classes of licenses you want to allow or not allow in the township. And just to start off, the reason why, and I wasn't here, but I understand why the township opted out, is because there was an automatic opt-in. So if you didn't opt out, you were in, meaning retail cannabis was allowed in any zone where retail was allowed if you didn't opt out. So most towns opted out, and even if you were going to opt right back in, it was a prudent move to opt out and then create your own zoning for cannabis in particular. Another thing is once you opt in, you're in for at least 5 years. You can't opt back out for 5 years. And then you also have the issue of grandfathering in, which I don't know if you know, but if you have a use and it later becomes a non-conforming use or non-allowed use, you're allowed to continue that use because they don't stop you from working. So in other words, if the township had opted in and allowed retail and said, hey, this isn't working out, we're stopping it, any stores that had opened would be allowed to continue to use throughout that period. So opting out was definitely great, was definitely the right move, and taking some time and looking around. So I think that was, obviously the appropriate move.
Just
Yes.
one question. When
Sure.
you said if you're in for 5 years, but the grandfathering continues even if this municipality opts out
Correct. So if you,
for
into perpetuity, there's
perpetuity?
probably
Okay.
some non-conforming use in this town where you drive
Okay.
past a store and you're like, how the heck are they doing this
Right.
on this street?
Okay.
It's likely
Yeah.
they've been there forever and you can't just shut a business down through
All right.
zoning.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and that's just a rule with any, that doesn't only apply to cannabis, that applies to any use in town or it's called grandfathering.
As we do within both the planning and the zoning board, pre-existing non-conforming uses that are non-conforming with the zoning ordinance, not permitted, but existed prior to the zoning ordinance rendering them non-permitted uses or prohibited uses, they have the right to, without expanding, stay and continue going forward. And that's an excellent point, Jared, that would have happened. We could have opted out as a municipality, but those businesses, those uses would have had the legal right to continue.
Yeah, so opting out was definitely a prudent move. And even municipalities said, hey, we're all in on this retail from day one. A lot of them opted out and then opted right back in with the appropriate zoning so they could choose where to have it.
And they could opt back in at any time frame. Like
You could-
they
you
could
could
opt
always-
out on
you
a
could-
Monday and start process.
Yes, but you can't opt out at any time because once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, so that is accurate. So I think it's really important, and the classes are pretty, understandable, but I think one of the main things this committee needs to determine is what classes you want. I think that's one of the major deciding points, and then how to regulate it. And I'll give you some background on what's up to the township and what's actually regulated by the state. And the township actually has a lot of control over, and I'll go over that. So I think there's a class 1 license, which is a cultivating license, which is growing. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about it. And the other thing I want to point out is just because you allow one class doesn't mean you have to allow another class. There's no obligation. If you allow cultivation, you don't have to allow retail. If you allow retail, you don't have to allow manufacturing, with just a couple of exemptions from that. So there's a cultivating license, which is growing. There's a class 2 license, which is
Jared,
manufacturing.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
when you get the growing, is that commercial only, or it allows just a general resident to?
So no, so there is no personal use growing allowed currently in New Jersey. There is some talk about having like a 5 to 10 plant
Right.
minimum, and obviously that comes to the enforcement side too. But currently, there's no personal growing allowed. And another interesting thing is because cannabis is outlawed federally, we can only sell weed or cannabis that's grown in New Jersey, because transporting the raw product across state lines is actually a federal crime, which makes this whole thing kind of absurd. And that's also some of the supply issues that New Jersey has, because you have to have enough cultivating licenses and enough manufacturing licenses to have enough product to put on the shelves of the retailers. But currently, and until there's some federal legislation or some additional legislation, all cannabis manufactured and sold in New Jersey has to be grown in New Jersey.
As you're going to hear momentarily, crossing municipal lines is not prohibited, and in fact is delivery. To get ahead, I apologize, but just to make the analogy, one thing municipalities can't do is stop delivery services from coming into the town or through the town. So intermunicipality or intermunicipal commerce is allowed and protected. Interstate commerce, a federal crime.
So that's actually the class 6 license, which is
I
a
apologize
cannabis,
for getting ahead.
which is the cannabis delivery license. And that's actually one that I was gonna say, we do have some control. So we can control whether or not that storefront is in our township, right? Because the actual licensee will have the storefront and whatever traffic that may, create. However, Steve's right, you cannot ban the delivery service within your town. So everybody in the town, once this delivery services get up and going and there's an app for it and people are delivering, you cannot prevent people from delivering to your town, but you don't have to have those businesses based in your town. So that's the class 6. Class 3 is wholesale. a license, which is simply warehousing of manufactured products. There's a distribution license, which is delivering the product from the wholesaler to the retailer. And then you have the retail license, which is, which is the storefront. All delivery services they can only go to retailers. The delivery service can't pick it up from the distribution. They have to be engaged with the retail license. And a lot of the questions that come up with is also consumption. So consumption is pertinent to, or is connected to a retail license, but just because you give somebody a retail license doesn't mean that you have to allow them to consume on site. And I'm actually unaware of any consumption places in New Jersey. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And I think it's in part because there's a ban on serving food or drink at a consumption place. So it's literally, you could buy your product and consume it there, but it can't be connected to anything else. And I'm unaware of any municipality that has actually allowed consumption, but that's something else you could decide. If you allow retail, if you want to allow consumption also.
Is there another issue with consumption and the fact that you're not allowed to drive while under the influence?
Well, yes. I mean,
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that would go along with bars and, restaurants. And, but yes, so that is also, so those are 6 classes to consider. So it's growing, it's manufacturing, it's wholesaling, which is basically warehousing. It's distribution, which is moving it, retail, and then delivery license itself. We already went into the opting in and opting out. The number of licenses within each class is something we choose.
I guess I do have a question for, so say the township were to opt in now, is that 5-year requirement still a thing, or is that only the initial group?
It's still
a thing.
Okay,
So currently, if you opt into any one class, you have to at least allow it for 5 years.
okay.
Jared, not to interrupt your flow,
Please,
but
keep-
I know that you have some good knowledge about this. So just at a very high level, if you're going to hit this later, just say, hold that thought. But I'd like to know if you have at a high level some of the pros and cons of one license over another.
Oh, one
So
license
we were pros and cons of one license over another. So you were talking about cannabis cultivators. There's a smell, an odor.
So
So that wouldn't be something that we necessarily would want to hear. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, but is there something like that on the other categories that we?
yeah, so I think I don't think you have to think about cannabis as like being like this foreign product. I mean, think about anything you'd want in your town. If you had a busy retail store, would you want a busy retail store, and where would you want it? First, getting away from the fact that maybe people don't want cannabis because it's a controlled substance. But you have manufacturing, the issues with manufacturing. You said smells, although there are a lot of requirements, and I'm sure Steve and Paul know better than me as to it has to be odorless, and I know we've heard about the odors. You have the warehousing, it's the trucks going in and out. So I think it's really township specific, and probably Paul and Steve and Tim and your governing body who are a little bit more in depth, like where the certain places of town are. I think when you decide what classes you're interested in, or maybe it's backing into it, where to put those and if you want them. But it's really, where would you want to see, a retail shop, and how busy it's going to be during peak hours, on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday. But other than that, no, I think it's pretty, it's really these classes, just because it's cannabis doesn't really change what the use would be.
Yeah, and Jared, I just want to, for purposes of clarification, nothing we're talking about now would impact one of our residents' right to use or consume
No, so-
cannabis within their homes, right?
Correct. Not even in their homes, in their backyards.
Yeah, right, because it's totally legal. Yeah.
Anywhere smoking is legal for the most part. Smoking cannabis is.
Right.
And it is prohibited on public
There
property.
you go. Yeah, that was like one of the first things we had to do was modify our.
But on your deck, you can use it, in your basement, you can use it. And the reality is it's, Morristown has approved, I think it's a retail and medicinal use facility on Ridgedale, right? So in terms of I think you mentioned the Class 6 cannabis delivery service, so Maplewood, South Orange, Morristown, the Uber delivery service could go in and pick it up from those locations and bring it in.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about these other things, whether we want to sell it or have a grower.
I think,
within our
I think what's
borders,
really
right?
most important is, do you want the retail, which I think is one of the
Right.
which is really, I think, one of the most controversial classes. And then you want to be able to manufacture and grow. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the other two. I
Right.
mean, I think warehousing, that's up to you whether you want warehouses in your community and how safe it is, but warehousing is,
Yeah.
you know, it's pretty, I don't know if you know what was inside the warehouses once you have, I don't know if there's, you know, a place for warehousing, but that's,
And I would imagine, and this might be a later discussion, it's the economics of it all, right?
Yeah,
And
so
so, and you might be getting to this, so I might jump ahead,
No.
but when you talk about these classes, is there an expense to the township for applying for a class, let alone what the revenue could potentially be to the township if we were to have any one of these classes?
so just the opposite, it's a revenue generator. There's an application fee, there's administrative fee.
For the applicants, for
the
the
applicants.
licensees, not for the
For
municipality.
the town?
We can
Not
charge, we can charge up to 2% on gross revenues, for manufacturing, from retail. It's a 1% on receipts from wholesalers. So, you know, it's a 2% on all sales. So if you had wholesaling, distribution and retail, you would make the 1% on the wholesale, the 2% on the distribution, and then when the retail sold it, you get another 2% on gross.
It's a transfer tax. It's 2%, I think it's called
What?
transfer tax.
I mean, it's up to 2%
And
on
that's,
gross
and
sales.
that's in addition to the tax they would pay as a regular business. So the 2% is on top of that.
It's on their gross sales, so it's like on top of sales tax.
Right, so the town, the business is already paying tax to the town, whatever, and this is on top of
It's
it.
not a real estate tax, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
And is that different than any other commercial retailer that we have in the
Yeah, because the
township?
money comes to the township rather than the state.
That up to 2% and up to 1% on the wholesale.
And that detail of like up to 2%, is that part of the purview of our intention? Is to have
I mean,
an
I
opinion
would
on
know-
what percentage of 2%, like what
Yeah,
part?
I don't know
Is that
why
not
you'd go lower than
Yeah.
2%,
Yeah.
but yes, it is in your purview.
But no, it's a good point because I know like one of the big critiques of it is it's so expensive, so people aren't going through legitimate
Right.
routes to get it because you can get it so much cheaper somewhere else. It's because of these levies.
I guess the only reason to go lower is if Morristown charges only 1%.
Yeah.
You know, I guess
Yeah, we
everyone
wanted
should-
Yeah.
I will say though, at least on the retail side, it's still very competitive, meaning I don't think you have to get competitive. If you were to allow retail, I think you would probably have a line at your door on any use. I'm not saying to allow it, I'm saying that
Right.
the competitive nature is there's more licenses out there than places to put them.
And ultimately, I would imagine the more that this rolls out into the state, the competition will drive prices to where they,
Yeah.
to a normal level,
Yeah.
whatever that normal is.
All right, so,
So just to be clear, I'm sorry, because your question was just like right where I was at. So we would charge a normal tax, whether it's real estate tax, property tax, sales, whatever, to the
so the
commercial
sales tax
property.
doesn't come to the municipality,
Right.
that only goes to the state.
So it would be just the normal real estate
Whatever business tax.
business tax that we do.
Yeah, for the-
And then, so they would pay that, and then on top of that, that's when we would institute the cannabis
Yes,
tax.
I believe
Yeah,
so.
I mean, typically the landlord would be paying the tax and the tenant, you know, in a tenant relationship, let's say owned the building, they would be, you know, paying a portion of it back.
Property tax.
But we get
Based on
property
the-
tact.
Based on the assessed value of the property.
Got it.
Right.
And if they
But
make it,
but it would be 2% more than like
Over
a sporting goods store in the same spot.
Correct.
It's still a financial,
Right,
significant financial benefit.
On gross revenues, and
Yeah.
that's a key point. It's not, you
Not
can't, you
net.
can't cook the books and say, oh,
Not
we
net.
can make any money.
Yeah.
But speaking on the books point, is that going to burden our resources? Do we have to audit to make sure we're getting the 2%, or are we going to take their word?
Yeah, we
Based
can,
on
we
the-
can, we can get into this. We're gonna
We're
have
gonna
the
get
tax assessor come talk about some of those things.
audit the
So hold that thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's probably the next level or two.
Well, they're also, I think, regulated by the state too, so a lot of that,
Yeah, I
like
guess if they
every
put on a
single
tax
dollar is
tax
already
return, we
being-
could-
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the
Yeah.
tax return should tell them.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
state's getting a tax too, within all
Yeah,
of,
there's
they've
nothing
already
hiding
taken
now.
theirs.
I would think there's nothing hiding in this
Well,
industry.
people do hide on the tax return, but I
No,
guess.
they
we
might,
could
but I
do-
mean, like I think the system that the state has in place is like overly like detail oriented, so they already have a strong idea.
So again, I think the only other thing that I mean, I'm happy to talk more and answer questions, but you know, I've talked for quite some time, but I'm happy to continue. So we can, within each class, we can govern the times of operation, the location, the manner, the number. We could put in all sorts of, you know, we really have a lot of control over where if we decide that any of these classes, you know, are good for the township, and again, we're just making a recommendation to the governing body here, but if we make a recommendation and the governing body goes, decides to adopt any of the recommendations of this committee, there's a lot that we can do with hours, location, times that are open, what kind of security, and also all the licensing procedures. It's a two-step process. The municipality has to approve them and the state has to approve them. And the state will give some deference to the municipality's recommendation, but they're not bound by the municipality's recommendation. So we can do our own. The state does its own application check, but the municipality has its own, which is a little different because when it comes to like a liquor license, the state actually kind of deputizes the municipality to act as a local ABC agent, and we do our own investigation and we approve them. Here, it's dual. The municipality can have even more stringent requirements than the state has when it comes to who can have a different type of class license.
So I know like in Morristown, I know this is a thing, like the towns themselves can create their own entity basically to review all the applications, and then they can, and that's what they basically go to charge the fees, the application fees and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
I have a question. I know that in the industry, there's a lot, often focus on like social equity and minority-owned businesses. Does the municipality have the ability to impose like guidelines or structure on those types of things in terms of allowing a class, or is that state?
I think they give preference, and there's also from the statewide, there was a 10% set aside of all licenses for those types of licenses to the mandate. I'm not sure actually.
I'm pretty sure you're correct in that you could, preferences for certified minority owned businesses, women-owned businesses, et cetera. At the state level, that social inclusion is it's part of the process, and we certainly have the ability to do so.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're also giving deference to people who were convicted of marijuana.
You're absolutely
offenses.
right. That's the first one on the list, actually.
Know
Which
your
is
product.
interesting. Yeah.
Know your product. There you go.
Yeah.
New York State.
Yeah, I would think that at the municipal level, it might be challenging to set guidelines like that. They're looking at it statewide, so they're looking at a much bigger
Yeah.
pool than if you have just one application, for example, in your town, then it might be more difficult to try to
Yeah, because
direct it one way versus another. I don't know.
Just as an observer of what Morristown did, I know the emphasis is to choose local businesses,
Right.
and they didn't. In that case, the company's based out of Massachusetts, and there's a lot of criticism for that because there were Morristown-based folks who would gladly have done that, but it's just very hard for them to compete because you have companies who are established in other states
Right.
who are willing to just put in a lot of money to have it
Yeah.
ready from the
And-
ground.
And that's a key point that Mark just brings up because I know that certain towns in New Jersey they were kind of superseding the whole idea of women minority convict businesses, and they were looking at areas that were in need of redevelopment, and they were saying like Morristown did with an outside company. It's like, okay, well, this area needs to be redeveloped, so they're going to put in multi-million dollars to redevelop a product, an area, and then, oh, by the way, I get a license.
Mhm.
So we have to be
Hard to
cognizant that
compete
that
with
exists.
that.
Jared, you got a
There's
point?
another side to it, whether it's, minority-owned, women-owned. I think New Jersey is experiencing in some resort a failure of people who thought like, hey, I can just jump into this business. It's a very complex business. So you also just want to make sure the licensing, they do have some background, some history. It's amazing how some are flourishing and some are just going out of business. And I think people don't understand that reality. I think people thought if I open a retail cannabis store, I'm going to make $1 million, and that hasn't quite panned out. So that's part of it too. And there are certainly minority and women-owned larger companies that are coming in and doing it, but I don't know if it's a mom and pop business currently, to be honest with you.
To that point, I wonder if it's of value to find out, to know what does the industry look like in the state of New Jersey? Where is it? What towns have it? And the different licenses and how successful they have been as opposed to those or not. With the understanding that Morris Township is a unique community, versus, something in the Essex County area, for example. But I would find it interesting to know what's out there and what has been successful and the level of
There is a
licenses.
webpage that has all the licenses that have been approved. I don't know if we have that data as to which ones are successful or not, but maybe.
Yeah, no, and we can certainly ask those questions to the industry reps we have coming. So
that's good.
we're gonna have folks from one of the trade associations come in, but also a local planning attorney too, who's done this locally, so they've gone through the process, so they'll be able to answer other
Maybe they can
questions.
show, maybe that was an excellent comment, maybe they could show us a Jersey map and
Yeah.
kind of just show us where
Yeah.
it is. I think that's a great idea.
But the reality is these businesses have only been up at most a year and a half. There's not a lot.
That can have a long track record.
Yeah.
They don't have a long track record. So it's, it's how you view that data. It takes a while to get off the ground, obviously.
Is there an opportunity, maybe this is outside of the perspective, but on that point exactly, is there an opportunity to have access to some type of data of like an alternate state that's had 5 or 7 years of experience? Maybe, again.
Colorado. Different animal.
It'd be interesting to hear.
Colorado always comes home.
But it'd be interesting to hear from an expert in a more established state that might have some, maybe it wouldn't be directly related, but it might,
Number of traffic accidents, I think
Yeah,
I
right.
saw from Colorado.
Right, yeah, right.
I think that's pretty much,
No.
that's an overview, I think, of the law, and I don't, any more detail I can go into, but I'm happy to pass it off, and if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
If you want, I do want to make sure Paul's talking about zoning, but if you wanted to follow up on
Maybe a
anything.
few quickies, and then I may even seg a little zoning over to Paul, if that's okay. The municipal authority, as Jared said, that in addition, we have the authority not only over the number and types, et cetera, and numerical limits and licensing requirements and the like, but we can restrict locations. We can have buffers banning cannabis-related businesses in school zones, buffers from playgrounds, houses of worship, buffer setbacks, whatever we want to refer to. So that's zoning related. With respect to citing, if we are locating any such businesses and regulating that location, at the state licensing process, part of it is a municipal affidavit, letter, resolution, what have you, showing not only is it a sufficiently licensed locally business, but also that they have the approval to be in that location, whether it be a planning or zoning board resolution of approval or a zoning officer or a governing body letter, affidavit, what have you, indicating all those, I think, are permitted for showing. So that's probably a little bit of a segue into more detailed zoning aspects of cannabis-related businesses specifically. So.
Zoning's, interestingly enough, probably the easiest part of this, because cannabis is complex. And I think my office has worked, with 4 municipalities that has moved forward with cannabis. And our experience is similar to what Jared said, is most of them focused on retail. I think we've got 2 that just did retail, 1 that allowed other classes, and you can probably guess this, they can find it to certain industrial zones. And another one is kind of debating right now where to go. But what I've seen is mostly it's been retail. And by the way, most of the communities did indeed opt out. And now the consideration, it's all about the money. Mm-hmm. Apparently, it's a huge, the projections that I've seen in one of the towns, and the 2%, it's like real money, which is kind of why they're, considering this. So what I've done is I've worked with municipal council because, they're dealing with all the licensing requirements, the taxation requirements. I focused on the zoning aspects of it. And typically, what we've done and what I just drafted something the other day for another municipality in Morris County that is only going to allow retail. And it's usually set up in, you kind of look at a map to decide, where you want to do this to have the least impact, makes the most sense from a planning zoning standpoint. And then it's typically set up as a conditional use. And there are, a dozen standards. that cover some of the things that both Jared and Steve touched on. You know, hours of operation, there's distance or separation requirements from schools, places of worship, daycare, that kind of thing. You have your typical requirements. You want to make sure you have enough parking, the lot size is big enough. You know, do you allow this strictly in commercial buildings, or would you allow it in a mixed-use building where you got commercial on the ground floor? These are all decisions you have to make as part of the zoning, if the zoning kind of allowed that. So, you know, basically, you know, once I guess this committee moves forward and has some sense as to which classes they want to entertain, I think the next step is to do a zoning evaluation, and I can certainly take the lead on that in terms of, you know, what would be the types of standards that, you know, that I've been talking about. But, you know, and in the end, you've got the zoning component of it, and, you know, it slips right in the zoning ordinance as a conditional use in whatever classes you want to entertain, and then you have a conditional use and the specific conditional use standards for that use. And that's the way it works.
So we don't have to amend the master
You can
plan.
do an overlay.
This is just a
You
retail.
can do it over.
You can do it over. I prefer that's just my preference, Jared. I
I
prefer
see.
the conditional use.
You don't have to amend the master plan.
Can you just explain the differences between
Well,
conditional use and
okay,
overlay?
so a conditional use is, within zones, there are various types of uses. There's principal permitted uses, then there's accessory uses, and then, and our ordinance has this, you have conditional uses. And it's basically set up with the intent being that the use is permitted, but it's important that it rises to the level that it has to meet these conditions. So in other words, it's only permitted if you meet these specific conditions. So it rises to a higher level of review and regulatory authority. And, you know, we have conditional uses throughout our zones. I like that kind of better than an overlay zone. An overlay zone is simply, here's an overlay, we're going to allow certain types of cannabis businesses within the overlay. I think it's cleaner from a purely zoning standpoint,
You
which
lay
is
out
kind of
all the
my area of
conditions,
expertise, to lay it out as a conditional use. But you can go either way. But my experience is most towns have done the conditional use route.
If I could dovetail all on the conditional use aspect at the risk of going too granular, but as those who are involved with our land use boards know, to a large extent, it would fit into a template that already exists, the conditional use. And as Paul said, a conditional use is a permitted use so long as it satisfies all of the conditions that are set forth. So that's how you can really put everything in one template that already exists, because we have other conditional uses, houses of worship, et cetera, as does just about every, or frankly, probably every one of the 564 municipalities in the state of New Jersey. Side note, I didn't know this until recently. I could have guessed it. We have more municipalities than California.
I'm not surprised.
Last I apologize for the digression, but last I checked, they're a little bigger and the population's a little greater. But in any event, so we have this template already, and we can have the specific conditions. And the way it works is if a conditional use meets every condition, they come to the planning board anyway, even if they meet all the conditions. We as the gatekeeper
That's the other reason I like it.
comes to the planning board, in essence, to confirm that they meet all the conditions, i.e. they are a conforming conditional use. If one condition is not satisfied, zoning board of adjustment, as our zoning board members and our planning board members do also know, because then it is a conditional, a non-conforming conditional use, a D3, is a relatively high variance to obtain with the proofs, et cetera. And then, of course, if you expand a D3, then you're back into a D-type situation potentially as well, depending upon that. So yeah, it covers all the bases. It's in a template that already exists. It's going to come to a board, even if it's fully conforming, but would otherwise be a permitted use. It's a fully conforming, conditionally permitted use. So I see why Paul recommends it that way. I wouldn't disagree.
I just want to say, I think this committee, one thing's important, I think Paul said it also. I think the main question is, do we want any classes, and if so, which ones? And then even from like a higher level, not this, and the granular level is very important, where Paul and Steve and the government want to get involved. But yes, we really like this class, and yes, we think cannabis should be here, and these are classes we think we want. And then if there's some general conditions, you say like, hey, we really want this, but it shouldn't be near a school, it shouldn't be near. I think those are the kind of things that this committee should come out in, because these other, it's really turning in what the township wants, what the governing body wants, and then letting the professionals put that into
So from
place.
an overall policy perspective.
Yeah, I think it's more.
And then we know how to kind of put that into
Yeah.
the standards.
Yeah.
So,
No,
I'm
that's okay.
So going back to, and I think that this is a good time to go back to revisit the licenses, manufactured. Now, does the law, I think initially the law said that you could only manufacture cannabis in medicinal pill tincture form. I don't know if it's changed for edibles.
It has.
It has changed. So edibles now on.
So it can't look like candy, and it can't be marketed towards children, but there's edibles in all flavors, shapes, sizes.
Right, well, a lot of that looks like candy.
Or vitamins.
No,
gummy
but the
vitamins.
packaging.
Right, well, gummy, right.
But the packaging.
Oh, the packaging,
It's
gotcha.
all in the packaging. The inside may look like candy, but I mean, if you've gone on websites, they have like a box of Nerds, but it's really, or like or whatever candy like
Sour
candy,
Patch.
like Sour Patch Kids, and it says Sour Patch Kids, and then you open it and it's not Sour Patch Kids. So that's not allowed in New Jersey, but the edibles have expanded. There's
So one of the things then I think that we need to go through as we look at, which types of licenses might work if we decide to go that route, what would a business that has that kind of license look like? How much square footage do they need? Number of employees, what does that business really look like? And because we all know about retail because that gets the most press, but there's other licenses and that the township can possibly benefit from. But we just need to know a little bit more about that type of business. So
Just as a, and I apologize, just as a side note, because I neglected to mention, I was involved in an application. There is one type of cannabis-related business or use that is not part of the 6 licenses. That's an opt-in, opt-out, and it's generally permitted, but it depends. It can be zoned, and that's cannabis testing facilities. It's not part of what we're necessarily going through here, but just for everybody's edification. And by testing, I mean, while it's not FDA testing because it's a federal crime, it's not. So the FDA is not going to test it. It's the international standard, ISO. They have standards for testing, but that's laboratories with people.
They make rabbits eat weed.
That make sure that it's, that there aren't carcinogens of levels and different like that.
And you also
Right, so
you also have
so the
medicinal
labeling-
marijuana too.
And medicinal
Right,
marijuana.
so
which is
the
not
label- the
recreational class.
labeling for every batch of marijuana, every batch has to have the content of what's,
Right.
what's in it. And that's where I think you're talking about.
Those
the
are
labeling.
benign uses, in my opinion.
Right,
They're not part of this because.
but
they're
every
not opt-in or
batch
opt-out.
that's grown in New Jersey has to go through
Go through
testing.
that process, yeah.
So that is an excellent consideration.
So there are, those exist and they can be zoned, but, into industrial zones, what have you.
Yeah.
But that's just a
And then-
laboratory, right?
That's just a laboratory, and the product could be anything else small traced in the state, and everybody are watching every milligram or whatever whatever small measurement is. I'm not an expert. But
I was just gonna say, Jared, I don't know if this is possible. I did look at the website you referred to see which other towns and counties have granted license. Didn't see a lot around here in Morris County, but obviously things will change over time. What would be helpful, at least to me, to know is in terms of bordering municipalities, is if we can get some intel on what are some of our neighbors thinking about,
Sure.
right? Because we don't want to be, I don't think we'd want to be like the hub of retail in New Jersey and folks are coming off 24
Right.
to buy. I mean, cannabis is the legal term, but kids are going to refer to it as marijuana and then jumping back on 24. So I don't know, again, if that's something we could,
We could.
Yeah,
Look into
we
it.
can look into it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we have a general idea, obviously, with Morris. I know Morris Plains was adverse to it. They don't want to have it. There was
Okay.
talk about having it on Route 10, which is basically their border, because
Yep.
it's, quick, easy, 287 down the street. I'm sure Chief Shearer know, but
Yeah.
Tim, you probably have a good idea too. And I don't know of any other towns that have opted in near us. I know like Boonton had that grow facility.
Maplewood has some retail.
But yeah, but that's, we're talking about Morris County.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll check, but it's, most of a lot are doing the highways because of
Yeah.
the high volume of they're looking for, the traffic coming in on, easy.
Come in, spend money, leave.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think actually Parsippany was looking at warehousing, I believe. I don't know if they allowed that or not.
Yeah, not retail, they weren't aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking at warehousing.
Come and spend
A lot
money,
of
leave,
people
as long as you don't
rent
consume and then.
Yeah.
The other side of
Well,
that.
Livingston's looking
is,
at everything but retail currently.
Do we have
Yeah, but-
any potential individuals who are interested in having one of these licenses in Morris Township? Has Morris Township been approached with, I would like to have, a manufacturer in place, or I'd like to be a wholesaler here in Morris Township?
We've gotten a number of inquiries if Morris Township is going to do anything, but we never got into any specifics. First mostly people that want to open up shop, whether it's warehousing or it's retail.
Retail.
Is Morris Township going to opt in and do it or contemplated it?
Yep.
At this point, they've been told that we've opted out, but it's under consideration for down the road. But I've got a number of quotes at the clerk's office.
Paul, can you talk a little bit about just like what our zoning is like in the township and like just how difficult it might be to find like an ideal spot for any of these? So like to go back 2 years, I mean, and I don't know what's changed, but I remember we were talking heavily about, well, if you allow it in this zone exists all throughout the township. And like what I was saying before, is you don't want it to be at Stephanie's Deli or Fairchild Market, even though you want it somewhere else, it's the same zone. So like what is our biggest challenge from a zoning perspective? Like, I see down the road, say in Mount Kimball Avenue, all those offices go vacant, they're sitting there for 10 years. Maybe that's a grow facility, they turn into a warehouse. That's a long time from now. But like, currently, like, what do you think, any of these businesses would actually, where would they want to go and what would they actually want to do, you think?
So I think we could deal with the retail separate from the others because the manufacturing and the cultivation require a much larger land area. They're usually confined to, industrial type districts. And you remember when we were kind of just looking at our industrial zone, it's the I-21. It's not extensive. It's got multiple owners. The lot sizes are small. There's like one big warehouse facility in the whole town.
And they have.
And I'm looking,
existing
again, I'm
overlays already.
focusing on the cultivation and the manufacturing. And just based on my own experience and talking to other professionals, most of the manufactured cultivation, which is actually, and you're right, it's only like a year and a half into it, where they're either built facilities or I know have been involved in the approval process, has actually been down south, of the southern part of the state. Where there's more land area. I mean, I haven't done an inventory, but that kind of makes sense to me, just based on my knowledge of the state and kind of working in like the northernmost 12 counties of the state. So, and again, what I've seen in terms of conditional use standards for the non-retail is, fairly large lot size things that, I don't know whether or not the existing development context here can overcome that in order to, without, for example, land assemblage and those kind of things. I mean, I'm really not dug into it. On the retail side, that's a lot more simple because it's basically a retail store and you got to provide the necessary parking, based on the typical parking standards, the same as most retail uses. What I have found, and this may not apply directly to Morris Township, but it's interesting that the towns who've had allowed it, the retail, it seems to me that they've confined, and I don't know what either your experience is, Steve and Jared, is that they seem to prefer that it be in retail districts that are sort of like non-downtown. They've not wanted it in the middle of the downtown. They've wanted it a little bit more off the beaten path. I don't know if that's been your experience.
They don't want to be the focal point.
Yeah, they don't want it to be the focal point. Now, Morris Township has commercial districts, but it doesn't have a traditional downtown. So I think the issue is to, you've got the B11 zone. It's not extensive, other than perhaps Speedwell and Madison. There's a couple of those little neighborhood business districts there. But, the real issue is, the level of activity, these things are popular from what I gather. I know in one of my towns, they opened one and it was like a madhouse.
Where's that for?
Bloomfield.
It's like a Chipotle.
Yeah.
I've actually heard good things about
Yeah.
Bloomfield,
Yeah.
the way they operate.
Yeah, yep. But I think you've got to kind of understand, and this goes to, Mayor, what the conditional use standards are. Hours of operation, I've drafted things that said, believe it or not, no drive-through cannabis. I don't think that's something you want to encourage, But, I think once you kind of, understand which classes that you want to entertain, then I think the time is to do at least some initial vetting from a zoning standpoint, knowing your existing zoning. And that also doesn't preclude, looking at potential for, a zone change, understanding the dynamics of the market these days. As you say, you have areas which are traditionally have been office campuses and they're looking to reinvent themselves. So maybe that's an opportunity, which isn't going to have less impact on a surrounding residential neighborhood as compared to, let's say, some of the small B11 zones where it's 4 shops and then it's surrounded by residential. But I think, as Jared said, I think once you kind of get to the sort of overriding policy goals as to where you want to go, which classes, how many licenses do you want to sort of entertain per class, that's another thing, right? And then I think you can start to do the zoning investigation. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to add it, but that's
a good point. I think it's important to know the sort of the general limitations that may exist from a practicality standpoint before you go too far down the road of what from policy perspective may be the recommendation and the governing body might ultimately want to do. But so that's helpful. But yeah, that at a certain point it becomes start with, as always, what's the policy first, and then to the to the granular, because where do we put it?
Yeah. So does anyone know, because I don't, does anyone know up in this neck of the woods, any experience with either cultivation or manufacturing? Because I don't.
No.
We were talking about Boonton Township has a grow facility that got a lot of complaints.
Right.
But that was a while ago. I don't know if
I
they
think it
fixed
originally
it.
started as a medical marijuana facility.
Is that indoor?
Yes.
All
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
hydroponics? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a lot of complaints of the odor.
Did
The
they resolve
exhaust
them, do you know?
I thought they did. I thought they
They did.
enhanced the.
Yeah.
Did they do something? I don't know.
But that was a complaint. So yeah, you're right, because it was medical, so it existed before, because this came up in 2021 when we opted out, and there were people
We had
who
some
had been
people
to
from
Boonton and talking
Wait,
about it.
Reddington Township down
right, all kinds of issues.
in a similar situation where it was I think a former Walmart or something that was
I
used
know
as a
that site.
hydroponics.
Right.
On
And
22.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, same situation last I heard.
So at
We
this,
smelled.
at this point, do we want to go back and look at these 6 and say, do any of these make sense? And if so, then we can begin to drill down on some of these. Or does, if any of them make sense based on our.
I'd like to hear from the industry people before we even go there, because I still am not clear in my own mind what the real pros and cons are for each of these license types. I do know that some of them have acreage requirements that we would find it really difficult to meet in the township. And that might cause them to fall off the list just from the get-go as a result. But I'd really like to hear from the industry folks who are coming to talk to us, who can really tell us more about these things. Because I think this is a really good presentation, but
Yes.
I have more questions than answers in
Mark,
here.
when does
I agree with you, and the
Coming in.
chief, you also want to hear from your chief of police also.
Yeah,
I think
I'd like
That's
to
a very
hear
important
from,
person
from
to
the chief.
understand his concerns or not, and, you know, his feelings beyond
And,
it.
and I'm just gonna say from a school board perspective,
Oh, and school board member, of
my
course.
concern is keeping it out of the hands of the kids. You know, kids seem to be very wily. They can get their hands on pretty much anything they want. We had a big problem with vaping. We had a big problem with alcohol consumption. You know, we just gotta really
I
be
will say
careful.
though that marijuana exists in your town, and that putting like retail will not bring more or less, like, I just wanna say, like, they do have like IDs, and there's nothing from the outside.
They have bouncers at these
They have
places.
bouncers, and it's
Yeah.
very secure, so I don't think you're gonna have kids sneaking into those facilities. It may become more accessible because it's right there, but I think that's, you know, I don't know if that's, we'll talk to the industry professionals, what their
Yeah.
experiences have been.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think I'd like to hear from them to
Yeah.
inform me more
Yeah.
of what we're really looking at.
Absolutely, and to your point, yeah, talking about the schools too, again, when we were looking at the map, there's schools everywhere, we have houses of worship everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Which makes it really challenging. We have like, every neighborhood has a church somewhere, every neighborhood pretty much has a school.
We got
in
10
the
of them.
township.
Yeah, you don't want
Why
to.
not
So-
counting the privates?
No, but again,
I mean,
it's not the concern the kids even
wine
have, you may
shops
not
have-
want it near
Yeah.
school because you don't want the people interacting as they're buying.
So-
This is just a new
Yeah.
wine store.
Well, see, exactly, and that's the thing, it's like, we're clearly not there that a cannabis store is like a liquor store, so it can be small and you can just run it. It's not,
Right.
we're not there yet. Maybe
Right.
20 years down the road it
Right.
will be, and it's not gonna be a big deal, but now you know you're gonna get these crowds coming from
Yeah.
the highway, driving on the highway to come get to it,
Good
so,
point, yeah.
yeah.
In terms of these,
Can't sell
to Linda's
liquor
point,
and cannabis.
Cannot.
Sell liquor and cannabis.
Or food and
Correct.
cannabis,
Yeah.
or drinks and
Combination,
cannabis.
yeah.
Can't do that.
All
Yeah.
separate.
I'm sure the local bodegas, the munchies.
It's about licensed.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
to further to Linda's point, I don't know, Mark, if the industry people are gonna talk about financial projections, the economics of one license versus the next, because there's gonna be a balancing trade-off, the pros and cons, and I think, you know, if it says we're gonna generate $1 billion in taxes, I'm just throwing a number out there. We might run the risk of a couple of DUIs over 6 months. I mean, I think that's something will be helpful.
We might
to know.
consolidate some land together.
We might consolidate some land together.
We might just.
Swallow both.
So, and actually, these are great questions, I'm taking notes, but also, when you think of these things after this meeting, it'd be really great, I can compile them and send them to them, so they can be
Yeah.
prepared ahead of time too.
Yeah,
But no, yeah, and I know, if we're able to hear from Kathy Virarango, she may have some information on it, but, Chief Shearer will also, I'm sure, knows from the Police Chiefs Association how enforcement's been going and if there's.
yeah, that'd be very good
Yeah, I
data
mean,
point.
the police perspective is gonna be great, because we all have the numbers and statistics on that, I mean, that's
Yeah.
what our goal is, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Anywhere there's data, let's look at it.
Yeah, although, you know, some of those communities that are permitting it now, like for example, the Essex County communities, those are different communities than Morris Township.
They still might have data from before they.
Yeah, that's true.
and now.
Yeah, in terms
So,
of, great point.
You know,
great
they might
point.
come in and
Yeah.
say, you know what, use went down, or like illegal
Right.
use went down, or, we
Yeah.
found less reported incidents, and it could be more,
Right.
right? But it could be like, hey, we had less arrests in our schools,
Yeah,
I
or
don't know
no,
what the numbers are, but
no
like,
uptick
yeah,
in DUIs or anything, yeah.
Yeah. so it could be
absolutely.
interesting.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, and I think Morris County did this study a while ago when we were very concerned about the presence of drugs and other substances. It wasn't the Morris County residents, it was people from other counties who were
Yeah.
driving into the county,
Right,
doing their business and then
Yeah.
leaving the county.
that's why I made that point about
Yeah.
24
Some of
jumping
the
off,
data,
doing what you gotta
yeah.
do.
Well, Morristown's putting theirs on Rachel Avenue, right, by the off ramp of 287.
Yeah. You know.
And then you can get right back on,
Right back on
right
it.
on the street.
And to
So
that
Road
point,
24.
the one thing we can't prohibit or regulate is the delivery services coming
Yeah,
to
because it's
town.
here, you can't stop it,
I
yeah.
mean, or the
So-
residents' access to these,
Yeah.
by, because it may not change consumption in our town to
Right.
have
Yeah.
something in the town.
Well, but I think in the conversation that you and I had was, Ridgedale Avenue is right on our border.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you don't realize you're in Morristown
Yeah,
or Morris Township, it's not
Yeah.
gonna make, right?
It's at that point, when I remember in 2021, we were talking about it, when folks would say, oh, we should have it, like, let's just have it. I'm like, okay, great, where do you want it? And everywhere they said it was not in Morris Township. So so that's the other challenge too, because you say you want it in Morris Township. All right, it's gonna go right here. Like, no, I don't, like, every location, I know our borders pretty well through the fire department, just through dispatch, but like, if I was in the fire department, I would have no idea where the town lines are,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Hey Jared, can I ask you another question about these classes? Let's just say hypothetically, we decide to go with one of these classes, let's say class 3. And then, so we're in it for the 5 years, right? What if we decided we want to change that class to another class, to a different class? Is that permissible, or are you stuck with the class that you like?
You can opt in.
Changing or
You
adding?
can add a class at any time. You can add a class.
You can add a class.
Right, at any time, you have to
So
wait
I think
5
the
years.
idea is it takes a lot of time, money, and resources for people to get these businesses up and going. So I think they're trying to protect people who are trying to get there. So I think that's why they put that 5-year. I don't know all the rationale, but I presume that's part of the rationale as to why they have that.
Yeah, but
5
they're
And the
grandfathered
5
in,
years
though,
just,
doesn't it?
the 5 years is just the period at which new businesses can apply for it and obtain licenses.
So it's, if we opt into a class 2 today.
Yeah.
And we wanted to opt out of class 2, we'd have to wait 5
Yeah,
years.
so
before
4
trying.
years and 10 months later, somebody could apply for a brand new license and still get it, and then they'd be grandfathered in.
Yeah, I mean, right, but if we
Correct.
knew we were gonna opt out, we'd be crazy to like
Yeah.
approve that license, but yeah.
I guess that could be a, that could
Yeah.
be a litigation
But
issue
you're right.
too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you're right.
The on the economic, so, because we need to hear from people who really know and get good information and details. But I'm stealing from a little something that I found, and just to keep in mind, in addition, if we're looking at economic benefits aside from dollars that might be anticipated to be revenue generated by way of transfer tax revenue or otherwise, the commercial vacancies, which is not necessarily, there's that aspect of filling commercial vacancies. There's local employment, I guess, and there's also at least the part of the process is that cannabis businesses are required to make positive community impacts. So there's those in addition to. I just didn't want to focus solely on dollar for dollar
So the
transfer
idea is
taxes.
people come here to buy their cannabis, then they will maybe
Shop.
buy dinner,
Yeah.
shop, do other things while they're here.
And
But that's the funny part is because all these places aren't in downtown, so like
That's
getting
right.
back in your car and driving home.
you are driving. Well,
Yeah.
Here you go.
is there an aspect of the next upcoming meetings where there will be focus on things like what our commercial vacancies are and what aspects of the town, like what aspects of new business would bring to the town?
Yeah, so for the second meeting, and we may need to fluctuate the order of these based on availability, but we do, one of the meetings wants to be a focus on what are the impacts of opting in. So hearing from, an enforcement perspective, from the police chief, the tax assessor, that sort of thing. I did, meeting 3 would be, what does it look like, how have towns done it, and having the cannabis industry reps and attorneys who have repped cannabis locations or businesses to come and talk to us and how it went on their side and how successful they were and what the difficulties were. So we're trying to get it from both sides.
Yeah, but that, the relevancy of what our municipality might need, it feels like a really valuable piece too. It's like maybe we don't have need for extra businesses, maybe.
For sure. I mean, and do we know what our commercial vacancy rate is? I'm trying to think. I know EDAC talks about it a lot, but I don't know if we
And
know
it
it
depends
off the
on
top of our head.
what we're seeing right now is a lot of subleasing or things that there's long-term leases, but they're not there now. These companies are trying to sublease a lot of properties.
So,
Like at 412 Mount Campbell Avenue, it's probably 70% are looking to sublease because the work dynamic has changed. So we're seeing, quite a bit of that.
yeah.
I think our bigger challenge is going to be when regular leases expire, there's going to be more empty commercial office space.
So,
I mean, both.
No,
probably not
that's
seeing-
That's
spot on.
happening, that's
Spot
happening.
on.
and Megan Burke, who couldn't make it tonight, another member, she's on the economic development committee too. So she might be able to provide, from their work. But yeah, so try to make sure we have someone representing a lot of good other committees from the township to provide perspectives.
So Jared, a question for you, and I don't want to get into areas of attorney-client privilege, but certainly your firm represents a lot of municipalities, and presumably some that is doing one of these classes of license. Any regrets after they put these in place that you could share, to the extent you could And maybe Mark, you.
I got one, but you go first.
Yeah.
So regrets. So I have to say Union Township, which I'm most, and I'm not trying to steer because again, they have Route 22
Yeah.
and it's not Morris Township and there's not many residents around Route 22 where they are and there's no schools so they like the revenue. And they tuck them away in some other like industrial sites people are driving in. So I have to say that's, the other thing
These are retail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I can, so they have not,
No regrets.
I have not heard of any. I think that some of the issues like in Maplewood, where they thought they were being inundated with traffic and it was really be bogged down. I don't know if you, I guess I don't think you know where that store is, but it's like right on, there's like very little parking around there, but it hasn't really tied up other than the first couple weeks. So I haven't really heard of that negative impact, meaning that I guess when retail's announced, there's a lot of people out there saying, the evils of cannabis. Those evils have not come. I'm joking. I didn't think that, but people have said that. And the worst case scenarios have not happened.
So
I don't know if I answered. I tried to answer your question like a lawyer.
So
but
no regrets. In other words, it's
Yeah, I haven't-
the contrary, right?
There's no
It's,
talk
yeah.
of opting out. There's talk of opening more.
Why didn't we do this sooner?
So next door in Madison, which I forgot to mention earlier, they got a lot of press coverage. They had was it earlier this year or late last year?
Late
So
last year.
they allowed for medical cannabis in their community, and that included downtown. And then a medical cannabis business applied to have a dispensary downtown, and the whole town came out in opposition to it. That basically got the town council to actually get rid of all of their.
They did.
They got rid of all of their opt-in or well, I guess they couldn't have. They reversed their medical.
So
Yeah,
it wasn't a,
So-
so they hold back their
It
ordinance.
was interesting. So they went the medical route, thinking that would be most residents would be okay with that. It was a use that they were okay with, but they allowed it downtown. And the reason why they didn't want it is because since cannabis is legalized, I think the medical industry is going to go out of business, and they're just going to try to become a retail to convert from medical to retail. But I know I think they unanimously allowed medical, and then they unanimously got rid of it.
Yeah.
Very quickly. They had a lot of backlash.
So that raises an interesting point, right? Obviously, they didn't put it to a vote, but it sounds like the residents said, we don't want it, so we'd rather, to the extent the town of Madison needs more revenue, we'd rather you increase our real estate taxes or some other taxes. We'll deal with your shortfall some other way, just don't make up for that delta.
Almost like a referendum fund.
Yeah, it's
Right.
it's like a referendum, and I guess there's
In a way.
something to be said about that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I just think that's an interesting point, that they changed course based on what. the
Really
residents
quickly.
wanted.
They did vote, it was on an application. That's what they were
Yeah.
voting on, an application. Primarily security, traffic.
Yeah.
Where some of the major issues that came up, like there was a large turnout.
And
from
that
the
begs the
community.
question of if it was downtown Madison, when you
Right.
think about the environment there, the culture of downtown Madison,
Yeah.
if they had put it in a place that was a little
Right.
more remote,
Mhm.
whether they would have had as much
That's a great point,
backlash.
'cause they do have a
I
tree
think
in
Madison was
town.
putting it on the
Yeah.
very edge of their downtown.
Right.
Which was also very close to neighborhoods.
And
Exactly.
that was, I think, the big problem.
But yeah, so they not only denied the application, then they went back and changed their
They went back
ordinances to
and-
get rid of.
Yeah.
They had to pass 3 ordinances to get rid of their medical.
And they got the middle school.
Make sure they didn't have another vote on.
Like, yeah, but I just, they got a lot of flack for
Now,
that.
Morristown has already opted in on some of these classes.
Retail.
Has Morristown had any similar township, like communal reaction that's similar to Madison in
So we're kind of modeling what Morristown did in terms of they had a committee like this where they did the homework first and they made a recommendation. I have not seen any, there's not a lot of opposition because no one really knows where it's actually going.
I
And they know it's
don't
not
think
saturated.
that either one of them are up and running yet. So-
No, it's gonna take a while. They're not even, yeah.
So Madison didn't see it until it was actually
there's
up
two.
for discussion.
Right.
It's the only one
There's
that.
another, I don't.
Well, no, it's all approved.
Yeah,
it's
So
approved.
it's been, yeah.
So I guess, so we're past, so
Yeah,
Morristown's
I
passed,
believe the
you
only
know,
site.
at least from a.
And there's 2 of them in Morristown?
I think
Yeah.
there's-
The only site that's been
I believe it's 2
approved is
retail.
Ridgedale.
So the one by Lumber, the Morristown lumber, where's the other one?
I don't know what the other one is. I know that
They didn't approve it.
it's right on our border.
The second location hasn't been, I don't think.
No, just one.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I think that'll have interesting implications too, like if Morristown didn't have like a communal backlash like
Right.
Madison did, and like, you know, to many of the things spoken today already, like, we're so intertwined with like that,
Yeah.
like environment, like half the people who live in Morris Township don't even know what's here, what's there.
Right.
So,
They may even get mad thinking that we allowed it.
Yeah.
Or, but, you know what I mean? Or we could put one in next door and they'll just be mad at Mars.
They'll get mad at Morris.
You know, it's- yeah.
So Livingston did, where I also live, they did a public forum, and the town came overwhelmingly out against retail. And we're actually considering, we're gonna be introducing an ordinance opting into all classes, well, not delivery, all classes except for retail, which is why it's that town.
We can just Livingston Mall.
That's interesting.
If you go behind Route 10, there's some industrial.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Like Oakner Parkway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is it.
yeah, and across the street from the mall, there's a lot of like residential.
Yeah.
Well, now the mall's actually, the mall, I think it's probably, they're in a fair share housing plan. There's not gonna be any retail there, any marijuana cannabis there.
So we're almost at 7:45. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but yeah, so any like kind of closing questions or comments from everyone as we start going through this, or any last points from the professionals that we want to make?
I'm good.
I'm curious what everyone's like thoughts are though. Just
Yeah, I'd love
initially
to
what
know
your reactions
initial
are.
reaction.
Yeah.
Mine is that it's here, right? And the fact that, you know, with the delivery service license, anyone could, you know, like Uber Eats, right? You could just call and have it delivered.
Mhm.
I assume that's how it will work. Then there's really, we can't keep it out of the town. So the question is, you know, is there potentially another way we could maybe take advantage of
You can't
the
prevent.
tax revenue? And that's why I'm
Allow
interested to hear
That's
what
why we're
the-
here.
And that's why we're here. I'm interested to hear what the professionals or the industry folks are going to say about,
Yeah.
you know,
Wild, but you can't prevent.
that kind of thing.
Agreed?
Because the retail, I get people having concerns about it, but, you know, if I could call up the shop in, you know, in Morristown and say deliver an ounce,
They don't want marijuana.
and I go out on my deck, there's nothing we could do to prevent that.
Well, for sure, you know, if we decide to go a particular route and if, you know, the governing body adopts it, we certainly would want that business to be successful.
And we want it to be
Yeah.
successful.
So, I mean, that's a key.
You don't want to set up a
consideration.
business.
I don't want, I mean, I don't know if 2 retail stores back to back on Ridgeville makes, I don't know.
Doesn't,
I mean, maybe there's enough business for everyone, maybe not, I don't know. But for sure, you know, we want our business to be successful.
And that's the point before about knowing what our neighbors are thinking about.
Right.
You know, it sounds like we know about Morris Plains rejecting it. We know that Morristown is going to put in retail. Sounds like Madison, at least no medicinal use marijuana
But
facility.
if one park did, they didn't, nothing, right?
I don't think so. I don't think Hanover has done anything. I don't think Randolph has done anything.
Randolph has a medicinal,
They did medicinal. Okay,
on Route 10,
got it.
yeah.
And then Parsippany is, they have so much vacant space that they're
Yeah.
begging people to use that, I think, for like warehousing and stuff.
Doesn't
They have a
surprise me.
lot of them.
Yeah.
Ed, any initial
No,
reactions?
first of all, I want to just thank our professionals for the information. I think hearing from the three of you about your perspectives, your experiences, really informative for me to think about what would make really good sense. And, you know, it's one of those things where the more data that we get, I think the better prepared I would be to provide, you know, some feedback. You know, when we talk about what's going on in the areas around us, what does that look like in competition to what we might do in Morris Township versus what might be missing? I think that will play very importantly in making a decision if we are, what class makes really good sense. Because if there's a lot of retail around, maybe we don't need retail,
Right.
but maybe we need some other different class. So it's just a little bit more information. I'm really looking forward to hearing, especially from the chief of police, you know, what are the implications from a law enforcement perspective? And again, because we are such a donut, you know, how do we manage it all?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, what really is the benefit for the township of Morris?
Lou?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I have to say one thing is that like I'm definitely really happy with like the conjecture and like, you know, the discourse that this turned into, you know, when you decide to join something like this, you don't really know what to expect. And, you know, it seems very close to what you kind of said your goals were. And I'm definitely enjoying it and meeting and talking with each of you. And so I think that part for me, my perspective, which is even just the process already seems like it, you know, it's very effective. I'm definitely very interested in, to your point, just like how it'll truly benefit the community, because I think that it'll be really interesting to learn about how the industry is affecting our community. But in some ways, I think it's going to affect our community probably 80% the same based on what this decision is. This decision will just likely be about how the industry can bring benefit, or if it has some negatives to weigh, you know. But yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely, you know, excited to keep learning more.
Great. Linda?
I'm looking to be informed. You know, I confess that I smoked as a child in my 20s and inhaled, but it's been a long time since I did that. So I really don't feel like I know much about this, and I need to, you know, I need to do more of my own research, plus hear from the professionals who are going to be coming in, the industry reps, to talk to us so we can round out our understanding of the situation. I think what you said is here anyway.
Right.
So we got to figure out how are we going to deal with that and make it as benign and positive as it can be for our community. You know, I'm looking forward to having more information poured into us for consideration before we leap to really any conclusions. And I think even before we can determine what policy we want to follow, we have to know more about it, I believe. So I'm really anxious to hear from these folks who are going to be coming in, not only our local folks in the police department and the tax assessor and whatnot, but also projected from the industry experts. And I'm going to give you a long list of questions that I have.
Great.
And would encourage everyone else to
Yeah.
also for the industry people, so we really can
And we can just get right into
be
it with
informed,
that.
and if need be, we'll get them back twice, you know,
Yeah.
to keep pouring stuff in our little
Maybe get them
noggins.
in advance.
Yeah, sure.
I'm have an open mind, so I just want it to be, I want it to be positive, and I want it to be as benign as possible.
No, I'm just really thankful that you're all serving on it. I think we have a really good mix of different backgrounds, like from planning board, zoning board, board of education. Lou, being new to the whole process is also a great perspective as well. And then, you know, thank you to the professionals for being here to give us the advice. So I did have one last order of business, is trying to figure out scheduling some other meetings. So our next meeting is Monday.
It's Tuesday, sorry.
So I'm sorry, Tuesday, the 22nd, so about a week and a half away. Is me sending out, actually, I think I sent out that link for like, it went through like
Didn't we all
November.
respond with dates going
Yeah.
out?
Yeah,
There were
there were a lot of conflicts, so I guess.
I assume that's why you only went 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
If you want something done, ask somebody who's busy, right?
So I guess what I'll do is, over the weekend, I'll go back through that and see where the least amount of conflicts were. And with the expectation is I'll do my best to have it when everyone can be here, but if not, we may have to rely on recordings.
Yeah.
Like Megan's gonna have to watch the recording, and then
You said there's already like 2 more. So.
there's just one more so far,
For
one more.
22nd.
So, and then I'll just repeat, I did attend to have the police chief and tax assessor, but if they're not available, I'll flip it and try to get the industry folks in earlier. So I'll work on that as well to just make sure, and I'll let everyone know what to expect. So please send me your questions ahead of time though.
Yeah.
For sure. Any other comments? All right.
No, I just real quickly, I want to echo what Lou said. I think that the conversation we've had around the table tonight is, if this is an indication of where we're heading as an advisory committee, I think we're heading in the right direction. Very good discourse tonight.
Thank you for being constructive. We're under time. I'm not going to keep us longer than an hour and a half in any of the other meetings. So it's Thursday night. Enjoy your weekends and have a great Friday.
Thank
you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.